Yes.
I just want to catch you, your excitement about the scholars, because that's kind of where we left off last time.
Yeah, although we are going to get to stress, even if we have to sign out and sign back in. But when I was a kid, because the library for me was a very sacred space. We were there with a couple of friends every Saturday morning at 9 o'clock when the library opened. And we would be there all day. And, I was really young. I rode the bike over, and it was a tradition. And our librarian was cool. She let us play our transistor radios. And, I always thought, wouldn't it be amazing to spend the night in the library? Not accidentally getting locked in, but knowing we were there, and yes, we're going to clean up, and just being able to have nobody tell us we had to go to bed and just read until we got tired and fall over with a book.
You were such a good girl. I would have been tempted to sneak somewhere and, see if I could hide.
Now, one
I was a bad girl.
straight up way, because if we snuck somewhere and got caught, we'd never be able to go back. And I didn't want to risk that. And I always, can I spend the night? And it was always, sweet child, go away. And now, as it's approaching, and Tony and I have been back and forth, and all of our scholars have been tested, and they will test again as soon as they get off the plane. So we're playing it COVID safe.
Right.
Not letting me literally within 7 feet.
Good.
Until Saturday, and the tests come back, because even though it's a rapid, they ask you to give it, I think it's 24 hours in case the thing changes color, or however that works. So they're making sure that Tony and I are safe. We've got the N95 masks, and all the things, and there's a hand sanitizer that float a battleship. But the girls are just off the wall, and they, their universities have been notified, and 2 have requested a letter from the library, basically that they are here. They're going to be here for this time as Carter Johnson Jr. scholars, and they get credit for this, which blows my mind.
That's great.
They go back with the letter, they're going to get credit for this.
Yeah.
It is officially PhDs and PJs. That's the name everybody seems to love and wants to stick to.
Good. That's great.
I have been told.
Take photos. Take photos.
Based on what they're describing as their PJs, my camera might go, time? No.
Yeah, well, naturally, I'd like to see them walking around in their underwear, but okay.
Tony had said anything that is loud and very daddy-like is what she's packing. Little who I've had the most communication with is, I think it was lime green, a color found in nature or something like that. I have no idea what the others are wearing.
That's adorable.
But
they'll be cute as buttons. Right? I mean, they're like Muppet babies, right? They're all like in their 20s.
Actually, Jules, I think, we're ranging from about 23 to 35.
Okay.
I can't remember which one's the oldest. The oldest one.
At this age, I look at people who are under 30, and they're adorable. They're so adorable, but they're so young to me, it's like, come to mama.
Do you remember when you were the baby scholar?
Yeah.
I saw that expression. Exactly what does that mean there?
My 20s were very turbulent. I was doing a lot of things at the same time when I should have been really focused on the thing I wanted to do, which was study all the time and write poetry all the time. But, you know, met a Pakistani guy, he needed a green card. I felt bad. I loved him. I married him. You know, like a lot of different things happened in my life back then. I needed a job so I could go to school. I was in graduate school, so I worked part-time at a newspaper place. So I was just very distracted in my scholarly life, basically just trying to pay the rent while I was in school was the main thing, because I was kind of estranged from my family at that time. So I've always been kind of estranged from I was estranged from them growing up with them, but you know.
But look at the gift to the academic and kink world.
They never saw that. When I got my PhD and I was old, you know, I was like 48 or 46 or something when I finally got my PhD, my last degree ever. I swore to myself, not doing this again, because I had a lot of degrees before leading up to that, because I changed. I was an English professor, right? So I did that. And anyway, but and I told my mother, I was so happy. I called her, if you know, just Mom, I was awarded my PhD, and she's like, what is it again? I said, in sexology. And she goes, well, if it was in psychology, I might be proud of you. That was my mother. Sex was a dirty word in my family.
So you were an immaculate conception?
Now, you know, they were very odd about it, because in some ways they were European and mature, but in other ways they really absolutely believed that one man, one woman. They didn't hate gay people, but they thought they were weird and funny.
Okay.
But they weren't, you know, my father was probably bisexual or something, because he really, you know, the gays worried him.
For fear that he might be flirted with? They might.
I don't know what it was. Who the hell knows? You know, I really don't know. My parents were from Europe and led a whole different life before they moved here. So I don't know what happened there. But there it is. They never read Different Loving.
Seriously?
They told me it's not a book for us.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So they were happy that I had found work that I liked in a way, but they really didn't understand it, or how somebody could even become famous for. My mother thought that Dr. Ruth was like a foul-mouthed wench.
Okay.
So that's where I came from. And one might say, how did you turn out to be? But one of the good things about nobody ever talking to me about sex, when I was so curious about it from a young age, was the only way to learn anything was to experience it, read about it on my own, hook up with older kids who could tell me the stuff I wanted to know.
Didn't we all?
You know, and it was way better than having been taught, like a lot of my clients, they're taught sex is evil, sex will send you to hell, blah, blah. You know, I never got any of those messages. I was just raised by people who believed that sex was something, you know, you didn't have until you were at least engaged to be married, if not actually married. Yeah. And of course, you know, you didn't talk about what you actually did in bed, but it was assumed that what you did in bed was for the purpose of reproduction,
Yeah,
not fun.
yeah, that,
And I learned
yeah.
something totally different. I was raised in the hippie era. And all the older cool kids were like having sex with everybody.
Yeah, see, I was willing, down with the having sex. I was, not with everybody.
From the age of like 14, I just decided at some point that having sex with somebody, it was as normal as having a meal with them.
Yeah, but I don't eat with everybody.
Hey man, if you're paying, I'll eat with you.
Nah.
That was me as a kid anyway. Oh, yeah. Did I mention I was broke? I mean, we were broke as fuck.
Weren't we
My parents
all?
were not, they did not have any money at all. They were
Weren't we
working
all?
class. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like you come from privilege.
What the family was definitely Black bourgeois. Now, my
Yeah.
mom, who is the oldest girl, technically the oldest because the first child died when she was 6 months old. So mom was the oldest child, who went running off and dared to have a child out of wedlock. So my mother's relationship with her family was up and down and up and down. And,
Gotcha.
her relationship to her younger siblings was iffy depending on whether or not they were in serious relationships. The only one who she had a consistently wonderful relationship was the youngest sibling, her youngest sister, and there's also rumors that her youngest sister was actually her daughter, and we won't even get into that one. I didn't have the guts to ask while Dolores was alive, although we related more like sisters than we ever did like aunt and niece. So who knows?
Who knows?
But
Were you close in age?
17 years. So,
Yeah. Who knows? Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
but mom had me when she was 40. So
Oh, wow.
I was a change of life baby, which is actually quite common in the women in my family who can have children into their 50s. Have
Amazing.
had children into their 50s, which is no, yeah. Dear fate, the answer is no. I don't care if the ovaries are still working. No, I'm not going to be 50 something chasing a 2-year-old. But mom busted her ass to do all those things that she didn't get to do, because as the oldest child, she had certain responsibilities to the family.
Right. Yeah, it's shitty to be the oldest child with a lot of kids around, I think. God, you get used like nobody's business. You're like the built-in babysitter for the world.
And when your family has a religious bent, my grandmother, her mother, was the oldest girl and was trained to be the wife of a minister, because half of the family we had relatives who literally rode with.
What church were you? Baptist? What church were you in?
Well, see, this is where that all got a little confused. My mother's mother comes from a long line of Methodists who rode with Wesley when Wesley was in the US. She scandalized the family by marrying a Baptist boy. And when I first started doing research on the family and went down to the town they founded, one of the senior relatives who found me went, "Oh, your grandmother married that Baptist boy." Excuse me? Really? It's like 60 years later and y'all still remember this?
It must have been a big shocking event in the family.
Actually, it was, with a whole line of Methodists. Now, the Baptist boy's older brother was a rabbi. was born in slavery, was born on the Levy plantation.
Oh,
Levy,
you told me about him.
Levy meaning Monticello. Mom got rebellion. Well, we forget Jews owned Monticello a whole lot longer than Jefferson did.
I didn't know. I literally did not know that.
Um,
So that's why Monticello, New York was all Jewish.
I'm trying to remember.
There's a Monticello in the Catskills.
I'm trying to remember Levy's first name. When Jefferson basically lost his money and his property and whatnot, Admiral Levy bought it and over the years restored it. As a matter of fact, if you come into, and you would never know, except at the gates, when you drive up the long driveway, there are two huge urns at the main entrance that both have an L on them. It was the only thing that the Daughters of Virginia couldn't destroy because it would change the complete tone of the origins of the plantation and blah, blah, blah. Well, Levy bought it, ultimately restored it. And the Levy family had Monticello for 60 or 70 years.
Wow.
Before the state of Virginia came in and got into a serious battle with them. You will sell it to us. No, we won't. You will give it to us. No, we won't. Here's the price we're going to pay. Fuck you. Then the state stepped in and said, we're about to eminent domain this property for the good of the history of maintaining the whoosy and the what's it and all of this other do. And the state basically came in and took it.
Wow.
Paid them 10 or 15 cents on the dollar. And basically when they took it lock, stock, and barrel. Furniture, the whole 9 yards.
Wow.
And gave it to the Historical Society. The family fought them for the longest time, but there was nothing they could do about it. So the back and forth between Monticello.
The disenfranchisement of minorities in America. What a long and rich history it's had, huh?
Yeah. With the back and forth between the
an erasure. Disenfranchisement and erasure.
Half the slaves from White Plains were constantly going over to the Levy's plantation for harvesting and all of this other nonsense because they grew crops that came in at different times. The Levy's had no problem teaching their slaves to read and teaching them trades.
Oh.
And Thomas, the oldest brother, became a rabbi. So, okay, now you've got Methodist, Baptist, Jewish. My mother scandalized, well, her younger sister became an Anglican in order to marry the man she loved. The family looked at it as a marriage of convenience. But when my mother converted to Anglican, why don't you picture my weekends? But getting out of that,
One thing I wanted to mention, because this is a big thing for me, actually. When I was in college, I got to study poetry with Owen Dodson. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but you should look him up. Owen Dodson, Dodson. And I met him towards the end of his life, and his health was really failing. He had really bad, I guess, sickle cell anemia. But he invited me to his house for a dinner once. And I had never seen such wealth in my life. I don't know if it would look the same to me today, because now I've seen how like 1%ers live. I've been around a bit, and that's a whole other thing, But he lived in this sprawling apartment on the Upper West Side, the likes of which I'd never seen, filled with all of these amazing things from all of his extensive travels around the world. He had ethnic art that was Just everything was spectacular. And in his bathroom, he had papered one wall with postcards from like all of his friends and acquaintances.
Cool.
And they were really famous people. You know, W.H. Auden, it turned out he used to spend his summers with Auden. And actually, Owen, I didn't realize it at the time, but nowadays, I would say he was probably bisexual. He was probably doing more than just sitting on the beach with W.H. Auden, you know, in Greece, you know, on a Greek island, you know, but he was so good to me. Anyway, but the real thing is I came there and it was a dinner and it was a formal dinner. And he had Nigerian royalty at his table. And I was like a little kid from, my father worked in a factory. You know, I was a scrappy little Brooklyn kid. I was just very smart. But I'd probably still talk like I was from Brooklyn. I had a heavy Brooklyn accent. And everyone was so nice and so genteel and gentle with me, except for his sister who was like, "Child, eat your greens."
That's a woman I understand.
You know, and I was like, what are those things? I had no idea. You know, I had never encountered greens in my life as a Jewish girl. Up until then. But what really impressed me and what I've learned about him is that, you know, he came from a very, I mean, he came from old wealth. What anyone in America would call old wealth. In other words, by the 19th century, his family was doing well. And he went to like Harvard and he ran a program, the drama program at Howard for years, you know, and it awakened me to the reality that where I grew up, everybody was poor and the Black people were poorer than the rest of us. Right? And there was always this prevailing white impression that like the only Black people with money were the sports stars. Right? And the reality is that there has always been, as you put it, a bourgeois Black community, a very important historic human beings who contributed to the science and arts and were really never recognized, and really their families have never been recognized.
And then along comes, let's take first great incident of the destruction of Black wealth, which was Bloody Summer, which was 1918, the year before Tulsa. You know, everybody thinks that, you know, the Tulsa Massacre was the first, and it wasn't. There was an entire summer the year before. Six great Black towns or neighborhoods were all burned to the ground, mostly out of jealousy. You know, they were thriving, they were
absolutely
on their own.
And that feeling that, oh, they can't be better than us, you know, that ignorant white,
is what took them all down. Rosewood.
The entire community?
Yeah, they burned down the entire section of town in order. Well, Rosewood was its own village in Florida, razed to the ground. I can't remember the neighborhood in Chicago. That was another famous one. They burned and looted about 15 blocks. You know, there were others before Tulsa. Tulsa is the one that stands out in everybody's mind because it has become the recent topic du jour, because Trump decided to hold his rally there on Juneteenth, which was when the town was burned down. So all of a sudden, everybody wants to know about the Tulsa Massacre. Of all of the communities, Tulsa was probably the wealthiest, mostly because of where the tracks were. Literally, the railroad track, a double set of tracks separated them. and separated the Greenwood district. And because of that, Tulsa thrived because you couldn't spend your money on the white side. Although about 30% of the population worked on the other side of the tracks. So what did? You brought it home. There were 40, Tulsa was called the Black Wall Street because within a 16 block area, there were 43 millionaires.
Wow.
It was a painfully wealthy neighborhood with everything, including its own schools.
And this I believe in reparations. I do.
The city
I absolutely believe in reparations.
Was so afraid that Greenwood would rise again because living in Tulsa, not only did I see it a lot because I went down to Greenwood to get my hair cut. There was no such thing as a black barber in Bixby.
Wow.
Bixby, Oklahoma is Tulsa's southern suburb.
I see.
And Jill and I were in Bixby. So running down to Greenwood was not a big deal. I mean, right. One, where are my people? Because I need a decent bowl of oxtail somewhere. But I also need a decent barber. This stuff.
I was going to say, right?
This don't work at Supercuts. It just doesn't. So finding the neighborhood and hanging out and hearing the stories. Because of the Greenwood district, only one long block of it is left. The city was so afraid Greenwood would rise again. They put a highway through, did an eminent domain on about 2/3 of it, and put a college right behind the highway. So there was no chance of ever rebuilding the Greenwood district. The city wanted to make sure after it had burned down, those Blacks could not come back and rebuild. But Greenwood is a fascinating study because, one, it was bigger than most of those neighborhoods, but its own theaters, its own school, its own hospitals. It was a self-contained, painfully wealthy Black town because the money from the other side of the tracks came across its own supermarkets and so on. And then again, it gets burned down. So that generational wealth never gets to get passed on. And Tulsa has talked many times about reparations, and every time it has come up, the city has gone, do you know what it would cost to do that? To actually pay back, and there are only like 5 or 6 residents of the original riots still living. But do you know what it would cost to attempt to restore that neighborhood? And we're not in the millions. We're in the
why shouldn't it be as painful for the city as it once was for the people who were destroyed by the city's decisions?
You see, we can't go down that road, though. See, that's not fair. Or as it's often said, well, we didn't do that.
You know why it's not fair? Because no amount of money could actually make up for the suffering that they endured.
If you are curious about what it looked like right after Trump's stupidity, I think it was July or end of July.
Was he on his way to Yosemite Park?
The New York
Yosemite.
Or not Semite, but no. The New York Times did an incredible online article. And it was important to see it online because online they rebuilt Greenwood. And you could travel, you could see it as the.
Wouldn't that be something to have that? And this is,
it's incredible.
I really feel, American society does not realize how much we owe to those Black superachievers. That generation. What?
The Black cowboys, the Black inventors. I mean, if
it's really to me, it's like the people who rose up, who said, now that I'm free, I am gonna work the fuck out of my freedom and be the best I can be. You know,
And there are
who were able to, you know, really rise up in a way that very few people have. And then to have it all taken away from
all
them.
taken away constantly, to the point where, you know, you get to a point in life when you go, why bother?
Mhm. Right.
Um,
And that was by the 60s, I think. That people were so completely demoralized.
I would have said late 50s,
Or
60s.
late 50s, yeah, maybe the 50s. Because 60s, people finally said, fuck this shit. You know? But yeah,
But
no, I think about Owen and what it was like for me, a very rough-hewn little Jewish girl, you know, and it just left a really huge impression on me. In fact, in my books, the novels, one of the characters is a descendant of that family. One of the lead characters, you know, a brilliant, super wealthy guy whose father built himself up again, you know, and
I mean,
was
are you
very well.
following the case now in, I can't remember, it's one of the California coast, it's very near, um, good Lord, Santa Monica. There was a Black resort there. It was the only place Blacks could go in the summer. The family had, I don't know, 20 or 30 acres and a huge run of beachfront property. Whites wanted it. The city just came in and took it. But what makes this story very interesting is earlier this year, the city gave it back. Gave it back to the descendants of the original family from
That's
the
fantastic.
20s. I think it was 20s or 30s, when the city just came in and said, you've got too much money, you've got too much property. It is beachfront property. There are too many Blacks running around here. No, you got to go. And they just took it. But there was no reason to take it other than to get the Blacks out. So they turned it into a park, which is what it was until the city voted to just, we've done wrong. It's not like we even took it for the enhancement of the community, as in to build businesses there or raise tax rates. All we did was make sure they couldn't have it. So we put a park on it. And now they've given it back. The city is still working out the details. The family is leasing back the land to the city while they figure out exactly what they want to do with all of this beautiful beachfront property.
Amazing.
But it made huge headlines, and I am sorry I can't remember the exact details of it, but the whole issue, which has opened up the reparations discussion, is the fact that the city gave it back.
Yeah.
We did wrong. We never should have done it. We're
Could you
sorry.
imagine? I mean, I think
Sure.
that kind of a historical rectification of wrongs, particularly when it comes to property and the seizure of property like that, and the seizure of wealth, and the discrimination against jobs. I mean, if we change that, I think it would change the whole shape of our political environment too. It would put more Black people in the centers of power where they should have been all along. It would give them back some of the wealth they should have had all along, because God damn it, they earned it.
That restoration of generational wealth alone,
yes, would be something else. And they really earned it the hard way. Boy, did they ever, what they went through.
And I was floored and incredibly impressed at the decision. We're sorry, here.
I know, it's incredible. You know, the Germans still pay reparations to Holocaust survivors.
Yeah. And I believe it's as long as I remember reading it in one of the Wiesenthal memos. It's not as long as the survivor is alive. It's as long as the survivor's next generation or something like that.
Yes, but conditions apply to the next I know, because they contacted me. So, and I don't get anything, but the condition is that you can prove that the Germans took stuff away from you, not just that you suffered. And my parents came from poor families. So they really, you know, there is no proof.
Now, of course,
my grandfather allegedly had a very small hat factory in Warsaw, but I've seen pictures of what that probably looked like. It was probably a basement with 12 people crammed into it.
But once it's taken away, how do you prove that? You know,
you can't prove it. It's gone. There's no record of it. It was like a little family business. It wasn't, you know, a large factory that employed people.
Yeah.
You know,
how do you prove that?
Yeah, so that's why I get bupkis. But I know my mother got reparations for her whole life. I mean, from a certain age, like in the 70s, maybe 1970s, I think they started coming in. Yeah, which was interesting. Nothing could replace the families they lost. But it was an act of contrition. And obviously, I feel that an act of government contrition is an important ritual.
More than just, I'm sorry.
Correct.
You know,
more than the American thing. Yes, but that's not who we, you know, you ever see, like, I watch a lot of court TV kind of shows, and there's always like somebody just, you know, or some Karen goes off and then she says, that's not who I am. That's how the government acts. We're sorry, but that's not who we really are. You know, that's not who America really is. Yes, it is.
Nothing but appreciation for your argument. Do you have a doppelganger or a twin? Because somebody that looks like you, sounds like you, shares your fingerprints, your address, and your DNA did this. So do you have a twin? Because if the answer is no, tag, you're guilty.
Yeah, and it's not just guilty. That is who you are. Who you are comes out under stress.
Or under alcohol.
Or under alcohol.
You find
or for no goddamn reason at all, except that you're a racist.
And usually that comes out in crowds, except for the very few who are just brave and stupid. But alcohol and pills, because that's the current excuse. I took a Xanax. So why didn't you just shut up and go to sleep?
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Well, I was under the
I hate that excuse. That's not who I am as a human being. Actually, that is exactly who you are as a human being. Own it and change.
And change. Do you unless you have a twin and you can prove that was not you standing there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you can prove that, I'm all up in it and will forgive you.
And that's the real myth of America that we promoted so heavily after World War II, that we are so much better than we really are.
Come put your face in.
Whose face am I seeing?
Lower.
No, move the camera. Oh, hello.
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 I got a Robbie.
Hello.
Hello.
I want to annoy you with that.
Okay.
So I'm easy. Jill's always difficult.
Okay.
Oh, great. You need a credit card.
How are you doing today?
Is that to me?
Yes.
Because the boy knows how I'm doing.
I am very happy to be talking to Viola.
Okay.
One of my favorite people.
Yeah. We hang out together. until I really make her life miserable by getting her interviewed, and, you know, stuff like that there. And then she'll go running from me, screaming and going, no.
How
Because-
undominant of me.
Because the next person I'm introducing you to are two tremendous interviewers, and I'll be starting that discussion, you know, in a Facebook group.
Yay.
Okay,
All right, I'll be back.
can't scare me, Vi.
Yes.
I'm not that little girl I used to be. The Brooklyn girl. Yeah.
Well,
So-
you know, some people say you can take the girl out of Brooklyn, but
You can't take the bitch out of the Brooklyn girl. Oh my God. All right. So, stress. Let's talk about stress.
hold on,
Can
because
you imagine the stress of our ancestors?
before we start, I am signing out. I'm about to
Ah.
send you a new link because I want that on a whole separate recording.
Alrighty.
So
Ow.
give me 2 seconds to send you a link.
Okie dokie. Do you want me to leave here?
Yeah, because I'm going to have to send
Okay.
you a new link for a new meeting group.